So, the Adeptus Astartes, superhumans that have been given all sorts of outrageous implants that are given portions of their primary gene seed to become the Emperor's angels that are sent to protect humanity and mankind. These dudes are usually pretty darn scary to fight, especially with their Primaris upgrade and all their armor and military hardware that can decommission their enemies en masse. They also move at a speed that is described in lore by their enemies as nothing that big should move that fast. For the enemies of mankind, these guys are a constant issue, with small groups of them being able to bring back entire planets from the brink of destruction. But some aren't as lucky as the Ultramarines are, though, that somehow take out enemies that outclass them by picking up a Necron monolith and hitting them with it. In fact, there's a whole chapter of them. A chapter that are cursed to meet the most unfortunate and violent ends, being victims of really unfortunate circumstances, that are forced to meet some of the most violent sacrificial ends in all of Warhammer 40k. That would be the Lamenters. They sport primarily yellow armor with a checkerboard pattern of black and white on their left shoulder, usually with the chapter symbol in the middle of it, which is a bleeding heart, which is totally not subtle since the bleeding heart is the symbol for empathy. What also isn't subtle is that the Mentors look like taxi cab transformers. They also have all that Codex Astartes compliant stuff, like the color of their left knee plate for which company they're in, and their right shoulder showcases their tactical squad symbol. The Lamenters are a successor chapter of the Blood Angels, with the chapter being founded at the end of the 35th millennium. Sadly, this founding of chapters was seen as incredibly cursed because of the incredibly tampered with the gene seed that made their recipients heavily mutated, sometimes having unique genetic defects just to that chapter, some being seen as no longer human. Most would turn to chaos, some would turn into mutants, and others were cursed in different ways, which is a little funny to think about because the gene seed that was given to the Lamenters was supposed to cure the curse of the red thirst and the black rage. The red thirst makes it so you want to drink blood, and the black rage causes the gene seed recipient to receive generational trauma and fall into a ceaseless rage, which actually did work for a time. It did give them incredible unluckiness, though, with them being completely wiped off of the face of the galaxy numerous times, while also being shunned by the Greater Imperium because of their founding. Which isn't really fair, because more than anything, the Lamenters are just really cool guys with some upstanding morals, especially compared to the rest of the Imperium that aren't too worried about normal human casualties. Heck, some Space Marine chapters even descend upon planets and enslave the entire population of them to keep their fleets running. But the Lamenters are humanitarian, caring for the preservation of human life above all else, being similar to the Salamanders in that way. That being said, they are Omega depressed, either because of their unique gene seed defect or the fact that they have to endure the unfortunate circumstances that the Lamenters often go through. Lamenters were a run-of-the-mill Space Marine chapter in the 36th millennium, and then the 37th millennium reared its ugly head, and a lot of chapters that originated from the Curse founding started rebelling against the Imperium. The Lamenters, realizing that they might not be too welcome in the main part of the Imperium, decided to go on a Space Marine equivalent of a vacation, with them going crusading in the outer fringes of the Imperium, going and helping those who are less fortunate, going around these border worlds and saving them. Despite all the good work they did, though, rumors and whispers came out from either other Space Marines or humans that were alive and got saved that something was wrong with the Lamenters because of their origins, which seemingly were completely unfounded. But they did return back to the Greater Imperium when the Black Legion showed up to crusade for the 9th time, when they invaded the hive world of Corilla, where they were one of the chapters stationed on the planets, and they were just straight up abandoned, because the other Space Marine chapter that was there just didn't want to work with the Lamenters, where they were left on the hive world all by their lonesome while the entirety of Chaos and the Black Legion bared down on the planet, with them needing to be bailed out of that horrible situation by the Ultramarines, who got rid of the Chaos Fleet, then checked up on the Lamenters. And I only say Lamenters because there were 2 of them. 2 whole Lamenters were left out of all of them. Not that anyone in the Greater Imperium exactly found the continued survival of the Lamenters as something they exactly desired. But the Ultramarines did decide to give honors to the chapter for their courage, but the Lamenters refused the honors, mainly because they felt like it was their fault for the large insurmountable loss of human life. The rest of the Space Marines didn't quite appreciate having their honors refused, so so the rest of the large Imperium started a smear campaign, which culminated in them going to a faraway and desolate western zone of a giant warp rift called the Maelstrom. And after a while, they were back, getting rid of chaos threats and pirates. I think to deconstruct it a little bit, the world of the 41st millennium and the universe of Warhammer 40k is in an insanely dark place. Most, if not every world that humanity has under its grasp is already oppressed by a ruling class. We usually have to work in factories all day, and that's just the normal human standard of living. But sometimes you can just wake up one day and your neighbor that worshipped the Emperor a little differently than you has risen up with his book club and is now taking over the planet for the Emperor. An Emperor that has 6 arms and wants to eat you, but I digress. The universe is grimdark. And since the Lamenters are actually out here trying to do good things, they're being awarded with lots of badness to abuse our sweet taxi cab heroes. At least they have new friends right now, like the Astral Claws. Sadly, the Astral Claws really started to like the Badab sector in the Maelstrom, which was found to not have a lot of backing from the Great Imperium when it was needed, all because of the Maelstrom madness with chaos and pirates and such. So the leader of the Astral Claws had a great idea to tell everyone that Badab isn't going to be paying the Imperial tithe until the Imperium helps the world of Badab out. And just like that, the biggest fight between Imperial forces since the Horus Heresy began over taxes. This started with the Astral Claws and friends, which include the Lamenters, holding their ground against the Black Templars. The reason the Lamenters joined in on this fight is that they could feel empathic towards the plights of Badab and the Astral Claws leader, because they too have been mistreated by the Imperium, which is why they thought it was a good idea to stand against the Imperium because of all the bad things they do. Well, they lost because they had to fight against the full might of the Black Templars. The Astral Claws went and rebranded and fell to chaos, dubbing themselves the Red Corsairs after being whittled down by the Inquisition and other Space Marine chapters with a war that lasted about 9 years. But the Lamenters were taken out about 4 years into the war with only 311 Marines left. They were re-educated and were forced to exile for 100 years in a crusade, where all the Lamenters were forced to go into the fringes of the galaxy to wage war on all no-good, super-bad Xenos and heretics, which was a pretty okay time to be around for them, with them slowly amassing more and more Marines. Heck, this could be really good for the Lamenters, and they could get some of their honor back by protecting the people and saving worlds, instead of getting mucked up in civil wars and being branded as traitors. They could really make their name out here. Then they met up with High Fleet Kraken, with many of the Lamenters taking devastating losses, stopping the advance of the Tyranids for some time, allowing for other planets to prepare their defenses against the Tyranids, with there only being about 400 Lamenters left, with them not being able to actually refurbish and make more neophytes because they were on a penitent crusade. The Lamenters were once again on their last legs, with them not even being able to help the Blood Angels' homeworld of Baal, because they wouldn't have been of use and still needed time to rebuild. Since then, in the current day of Warhammer 40k in the 42nd millennium, they've been fighting with more and more successor chapters against High Fleet Kraken in a way to go and get revenge. There isn't really a lot known about them in current lore though. Hope we get to see more of them soon. If you notice that I never talked about the Lamenters having a homeworld, good observation. That's because they don't have a homeworld. Instead, they live aboard a fleet that makes it so the chapter can be much more mobile and ping around to planets that need their help. Remember the hope that the whole gene seed modification from the Mechanicus was supposed to get rid of the Black Rage? Well, it did, but only for a little bit. It didn't rear its head out for a long, long time. Until the year 701 in Millennium 41, where large numbers of Lamenters gave into the Black Rage during engagements, which gives you these cool-looking Lamenter Death Company, for those that see themselves as Sanguinius and everyone else as Horus during the Horus Heresy. And they even got the Red Thirst back after a while. The difference is that, for the most part, these ailments only happen rarely. So if you're somehow the most unlucky out of the least fortunate, you could just suddenly get the Red Thirst or the Black Rage on an unlucky dice roll. Sad, because that's literally the only thing the Lamenters had going for them for a while. The only known chapter master for the Lamenters is Malachim Foros, who has the title of the Lord of Ruin. He's a showcase for the sorrow and stoicism needed to be a Lamenter. The dude held off the Black Rage multiple times, he's incredibly jaded, and he's constantly feeling blue with the amount of ultra depression he has, with a distrust for authority that made him ally himself with the Astral Claws that were now the Red Corsairs during the Badab War. He didn't know that they were going to become Chaos Corrupted though, so whoopsies. Officially, he was most likely slain when his battle barge exploded during the Badab War. But he may or may not be alive though. I don't know. Up to the 40k writers up there to bring him back or not. And that's a video on the Lamenters. Dude, I just kind of had these guys explain to me as a bunch of people that have bad luck that are huge humanitarians while also being space marines. And while that is somewhat apt, you start to notice that the main problems that occur to the Lamenters aren't just bad luck to them. It's the toxic and destructive parts of the Imperium that have either always been there, or a problem that's reared its ugly heads because of the eventual ruination and downfall that humanity is suffering from, with them really being victims of circumstance a lot of the time. I hope we get some more lore about them in the future and in the 42nd millennium, and I hope that the beloved Lamenters never go away and are fully wiped out, because the Lamenters are all about saving humanity and all the denizens of the Imperium, even if they have to pay the ultimate sacrifice to do so, and how they continue going on not because it's their duty, but because it's the right thing to do. For they will never give up on humanity, no matter how horribly they are treated, and that's very virtuous. But what do you guys think of the Lamenters? Are they one of your favorites, or are they just kinda meh to you? Make sure to tell me in the comments down below, and maybe subscribe and all that good stuff. Till next video, fellas!